Welcome to the latest episode of Lo-Fi Travel. How to buy a sari in Kanchipuram for non-Indians. So first off, if you're watching this video, congrats. You are a truly dedicated textile lover and I appreciate you. My entire time in Kanchipuram, I saw literally one other non-Indian person, so we are truly vibing and tribing here. For those of you who are uncertain about whether Kanchi is worth the trip, yes, I think it is. The temples are ancient and interesting and worth it, and the saris really are better in Kanchi. First, let's talk about the significance of Kanchipuram historically. Between the 1st and 5th centuries, it was an important academic hub for Buddhism and Jainism. At this time, it already had a well-established weaving community and tradition. The original regional weaving caste, the Guntars, also known as Kai Kolars. Kai Kolar actually means men with strong arms. As far back as the 3rd century BCE, they were considered the weaver warriors of the Chola Empire. They exported cotton to ancient Rome. And between the 4th and 9th centuries, it was the capital of the Pallava kingdom. The Saurashtrians arrived next in the 1200s and 1300s. The word for them in Tamil is actually Patnokarar, which means silk thread people. They were the top manufacturers of fine silk garments patronized by royals. So, like many cities catering to elites, in particular royal courts, production of luxury goods became a big part of the local economy a very long time ago. In some improbable but wonderful cases, those ancient crafts survived to the present, and that is the case of silk sari production in Kanchipuram. According to local legend, Kanchi weavers are descendants of sage Markanda, the Hindu god's master weaver. And though the sari is an ancient garment, looking at historic illustrations, the current form and style with its Kanchi-specific motifs, specifically the incorporation of brocade and damask, appears to have arisen about 400 years ago when two large weaving communities, one Devenga and one Saliyar, both from Andhra Pradesh, moved south and infused the local trade with their style. Those are also caste names. Salya means spider, for example, so we're talking about centuries of families born into the textile trade to this day. The caste system is fodder for a whole other video, but all 4 castes are currently considered backward classes by the government of Tamil Nadu, which is defined as classes of people who are economically and socially disadvantaged and face or may have faced discrimination on account of their birth. The official list of backward classes is extensive and also includes Anglo-Indians and Latin Catholics, so take it as you wish. Later in the video, I will get into how to do your best to make sure you aren't buying a sari made by an exploited person. But back to my original point. Despite top quality saris being sold in Chennai and other urban hubs, even saris made and shipped from Kanchipuram, most Tamil brides of means still make a literal pilgrimage with their families to buy their wedding trousseau and go to the temples in Kanchipuram because not only is the selection and quality top-notch, it's a centuries-old tradition. So first things first, let's talk about budget. A lakh is the Indian term for 100,000. The most expensive sari you'll ever meet in Kanchi is perhaps 2 lakhs or 200,000 rupees, equivalent to about 2,400 US dollars at today's exchange rate. The cheapest you'll come across is perhaps 700 rupees or about $8.50. So the range is huge. All shops have the saris folded in stacks on shelves by price. So if you start walking at wedding saris, everything you pass will get cheaper and cheaper until you end up in discounted saris, which are typically just old. And for reference, the salespeople consider any sari that's been sitting on the shelf for 6 months incredibly old. But some stores will sell heavily shop-worn and or damaged saris at a more extreme discount. Their usual customers have no interest in these, but for anyone willing to cut them up to make Western clothes, they can be a really great deal. The dimensions of saris do vary somewhat by region and by weaver. The standard throughout India for a machine loomed off the rack sari is 5.5 meters long, 1.15 meters wide. I found a lot of the hand-loomed silk saris in Kanchipuram were 6.2 meters long. Usually the additional zero point 0.7 or 0.75 meters indicates there is attached blouse fabric woven from the same silk by the same weaver at the same time to match. The traditional standard in Kanchipuram is 5,000 lines of thread of a sufficient quality for the finished sari to weigh between 750 and 1,000 grams. One hand-woven government shop sari I bought was labeled 48 inches by 6.2 meters, mixing imperial and metric. Generally speaking, especially allowing for seam allowances and wastage, you can expect to get 5 meters of fabric out of a sari, which is a bit under 5.5 yards. The difference in price comes down to several factors. Zari, or jari, depending on dialect, has the largest impact on price. That's the word for the gold, silver, and copper thread woven into saris. The traditional Kanchipuram standard 100 years ago and earlier was 3 silk threads twisted with 900 silver wire, or dull pure gold wire for people like local princesses. But you can't find that standard anymore. That's a custom order celebrity and royalty only thing. There are regrettably no antique or vintage sari dealers in Kanchipuram that I know of anyway. They don't really have the concept of designer consignment the way Westerners do. When they want to get value out of their old unworn saris, they sell to old sari buyers who burn the silk, melt the metal, and resell it to jewelers. Some jewelers even buy saris directly. So when you see a sign for antique sari shop or old sari shop, they're buying, not selling. Silver and gold have resale value, copper doesn't. So real gold in a sari is typically what pushes it into the lakh range, $800, $900, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. And real pure silver starts at around 30 or 40,000 rupees. So between 350 and 500 US dollars per dress. Though you can get a sari with mostly copper, some silver, and a tiny bit of gold for perhaps 15,000 or 20,000 rupees, 175 and 250 US dollars per dress. Obviously, it all depends on not just the metal content, but how much of it is used. The most expensive wedding saris have pure silver and/or gold zari woven throughout. On mid-priced saris, most metal is used in the border, and the palu or draped shawl section of the sari will typically have a wider border than the body of the sari. So the width of the border matters greatly, and the lowest priced pure zari saris will be borderless, but still use some pure silver zari, either in simple narrow stripes or in the buta or small ornamental motifs woven throughout. Sona Rupa zari means gold and silver are used in the same dress. Half fine zari means copper wire electroplated with silver. Tested zari means copper wire electroplated with gold. Half fine and tested zari has no resale value. And so most Indians will tell you not to waste your money on anything that isn't pure patu fine zari, which means 100% silk and at minimum a 50% silver alloy thread. Obviously, most tourists aren't going to be burning their saris for cash in 30 years. So it's a non-issue if you only care about the aesthetic. Just don't get razzle-dazzled into thinking anything half fine or tested has any value it doesn't. If you're spending the big bucks, the shop owner will get out a whetstone and prove to you what your zari is made of. The second biggest factor is textile composition. Hand-woven silk is queen, machine-woven silk more affordable, then silk cotton or silk linen blends, then part silk, part synthetic, usually viscose, which is sometimes called soft silk or art silk or semi-silk, then pure linen, then pure cotton, and finally pure synthetic, usually euphemistically called georgette, chiffon, organza, or some such. 100% hand-woven silk, called patu, can be had for as low as 6 or 7,000 rupees, or between 75 and 85 US dollars, without any zari at all, but is typically priced around 10,000 or 12,000 with just a little something something. A couple of narrow little stripes at least. Machine woven silk is a whole other animal. Hand weaving is the heart of the Kanchipuram tradition and legacy, and their flourishing cottage industry for centuries. So cheap machine woven alternatives are only available in certain types of stores, which I'll get to shortly. Silk, cotton, and silk linen blends are usually between 5,000 and 9,000 rupees, or 60 and 110 US dollars, depending on the intricacy and any zari. But you'll really only find these at co-optex or the department stores because silk cotton and silk linen blends are not part of the Kanchipuram tradition per se. Silk viscose blends come in a huge range of prices and designs because semi-silk tested zari is the budget alternative for people who can't or don't care to buy pure petu fine zari, but still want a really flashy formal garment. Again, these are not available in the heritage shops that people visit Kanchipuram for. And I will go into the different types of shops shortly. You can buy these in Kanchipuram at the privately owned shops, at the department stores, but you can also do that in any other Indian city. Because of this superficial resemblance to the good stuff, in the past, foreigners have paid pure petu fine zari prices for art silk tested zari saris in some very small, not terribly ethical shops. It's less of a thing now because of various government labeling laws, which again I will get into shortly. But the more common issue is foreigners just not understanding what they're buying. If the silver thread on your sari alone costs $50, this silk costs between 15 and 20, and the man who wove it has decades of experience and took 10 to 15 days to weave it, why would the finished garment cost less than $100? 300 or 500 is cheap for what it is. Fast fashion has totally skewed people's ideas of what clothes should cost, I think. More common these days is passing off a silk synthetic blend as a silk cotton or silk linen blend. I've had salespeople, even at the respectable old department stores, deny knowledge of fabric composition when it contains synthetics. If you see a semi silk blend priced lower than 5,000, it's mixed with synthetic, not linen or cotton. I noticed many salespeople would use the phrase soft silk to describe semi-silk blended with either natural or synthetic fibers, perhaps intentionally muddying the waters because Chanderi silk, which is a silk cotton heritage blend from a different region of India, and Tussar silk, which is a wild silk grown throughout various Indian states, are also commonly referred to as soft silk. And identifying these requires some knowledge and discernment that they must know you most probably do not have. So if they keep saying soft silk and you don't want to wear polyester, or you think the sari is too expensive as a blend, verify the fabric composition. Same for chiffon, crepe, organza. Some are 100% silk, but you need to carefully verify. Art silk does not mean artistic silk, it means artificial silk. Alternatively, just to avoid the category, that's not what you came to Kanchi for. They don't weave silk gazar in Kanchipuram if the fabric has any sheerness to it, and especially if it doesn't have the roughness of linen or cotton. It's probably synthetic or a synthetic blend. Pure linen, depending on the quality and intricacy, tops out at around 7,000 rupees or 85 US dollars. Pure cotton, even hand woven, can be had for as low as 2,000 rupees or 25 US dollars. Less commonly 100% linen, typically 100% cotton saris are available at dedicated cotton sari shops and at all the department stores. And there is some heritage value in hand-woven, what they call fancy cottons, which can feature Buddha, but more typically have stripes and checks. For Westerners, the most famous of these checks is what we would call madras check, madras fabric. To give a very abbreviated history, under British rule, the city now known as Chennai was called Madras. Nowadays, Kanchipuram is a 2-hour drive from Chennai. Back in the day, it was a day's ride away. And in the second quarter of the 19th century, local cotton and silk weavers started interpreting the tartan worn by Scottish soldiers stationed at Fort George in Madras in their own weaving tradition. Prior to British occupation, their checks were typically small scale and one color with white, something like the keffiyeh, the men's headscarves you see throughout Arab countries, or the ginghams you see today in Khmer kramas in Cambodia. Those regions favor those checks because that was the style when they were primary export markets for Southern Indian textiles. In the same manner, the fabric we today call madras fabric, typically associated with preppies of the 70s and 80s, originated with these weavers in and around Chennai. The Scottish soldiers' tartans inspired much larger checks with more colors, but still obviously brighter and lighter due to the locally available dyes, the local taste, and the nature of silk and cotton fabric. For someone with a British background, this symbol of shared heritage is potentially very poignant, but I didn't meet a single Indian person who even knew that madras is literally the word for bright, light, tartan inspired checks in English. For them, these are considered a little old fashioned and not generally favored by the wealthy. For reference, you can get a good Madras cotton sari for below 4,000 rupees or $50, and a good Madras silk sari for between 12 and 20,000 rupees, so between 150 and $250. The difference, of course, being that, again, Kanchipuram is about silk traditions. Hand-woven fancy cottons you can get all over Chennai. There's another weaving town called Korainadu, which back in the day would have been a 2 or 3 day ride from Madras, which also specializes in what we would call madras fabric. They specialize in half cotton, half silk. And the saris generally go for between 7,000 and 12,000 rupees. So, say between 85 and 150 US dollars. In fact, if you show a Tamil person a picture of an American madras fabric and say you want a sari like that, they'll think you're talking about a Kura silk, not a kanchi silk. Machine woven cottons and synthetics are the Wild West. If that's what you're in the market for, don't even bother coming to Kanchipuram. Also, there are very excellent Kanchipuram style saris woven elsewhere in Tamil Nadu, including Manarkudi, Kumbakonam, and Razipuram, but they just aren't the real thing. Kanchipuram has geographical indication. A Kanchipuram sari is champagne. A sari from these other places is cremant. Iconic traditional Kanchi silks have several aspects. Firstly, obviously, they are completely hand-woven pure mulberry silk. The mulberry silk only comes from the state of Karnataka, which was an ancient kingdom. And the gold zari comes from Surat. Silk and zari threads themselves are not produced in Kanchipuram. They are famous for having very saturated colors and very, very heavy gold weaving, with the borders and palu in a contrasting color. The body section usually has a few colors, the shawl section is in a solid color, and a Ganga Yamuna, or two rivers sari, means two different colored borders on one sari. In an authentic Kanchipuram sari, the body of the sari and the palu are actually woven separately. When the mundi, or the hanging end of the sari, is joined to the body of the sari, it's woven together, not stitched together. Traditionally, it's woven together with a zigzag line. 3 shuttles are used to weave a kanchi sari. It requires 2 people. The weaver works on the right side and the helper works on the left side shuttle. Kanchipuram saris were originally made in temples for the royal court. Obviously, religiosity is individual and people are less religious on the whole than they used to be, but weaving saris is still considered a sacred duty. It's the dharma of the weaver to create a textile with sacred meaning. There are short religious rituals to accompany every stage of weaving a sari, and historically, the loom was actually worshipped as a form of the goddess Lakshmi. Weaving, selling, buying, and wearing Kanchipuram saris are an act of faith of sorts, and the traditional motifs are considered auspicious and protective. So their traditional designs were simple gold lines or gold dots on the body and naturalist motifs on the borders. There are literally hundreds of stylized motifs that derive directly from local temple architecture, but the most common are temple saris or gopuram. The shape is obviously meant to represent the silhouette of the temple gate against the sky. A yazi is also called a vyala or vidala in Sanskrit. It's a mythical animal with a cat's body, a lion's head, and an elephant's trunk and tusks. He's the mount of Lord Buddha, one of the Navagrahas, and they protect the temple entrances. Arai Madam is the triangular niche in temple walls where you light diyas. Brides and grooms have special 9-yard saris and dhotis and usually have Arai Madam borders. Woven correctly, they look the same on both sides of the fabric, which symbolizes a couple that should stay together in good times and bad. The Anapakshi or Hamsam is a goose. It symbolizes the sun and divine knowledge, discernment. A goose can pick out one drop of milk in an ocean of water, they say. The goose is the mount of Sarasvati, the goddess representing learning, culture, and the arts. The peacock or male is one of the oldest symbols. They found it painted on burial pottery from 2000 BCE. The belief is that peacocks carry the soul into the afterlife, so they're associated with immortality as well as courtship, fertility, wisdom, protection. The peacock is another mount of Saraswati. It's also the mount of Skanda, the general of Indra's army. A 12th century Tamil text actually describes the city of Kanchipuram as a peacock, with the Vajraja Perumal temple as the head and the Ekamershwar Shiva temple as the feathers. It's considered especially lucky by Kanchipuram weavers and used pretty frequently. Related to this is the peacock eye motif, the Mayokam. The parrot or kili is also used pretty frequently. The parrot is the messenger of lovers. The goddess Kamakshi is depicted in Kanchipuram temple sculpture with a parrot in her right hand, and so the parrot is often woven into bridal saris. I should note here that there are some natural marriages between motif and color. So the Arai Madam is usually woven of gold zari thread. The peacock is usually woven on a teal fabric, a peacock shade fabric, and the parrot is typically woven into rich green fabric. The elephant or yanai is associated with prosperity, royalty, strength, wisdom. Lakshmi is often depicted as being flanked by 2 elephants carrying water for her. So in Kanchipuram, in temples where Lakshmi is worshipped, an elephant typically holds up the gate. The lion or sinham was the royal symbol of the Pallava dynasty. Reared up lions are often seen at the base of Pallava era temples like the Vaikuntha Perumal temple. The lotus or kamalam is the seat upon which gods and goddesses are usually depicted. It's a symbol of spiritual awakening. Rising from the muck of a pond, it blooms into absolute beauty. It's a metaphor for harmony and the unfolding of spirituality within each of us. The 3 stages of the lotus, bud, upala, and fully blossomed lotus, represent past, present, and future. The motif is seen absolutely everywhere. The 2-headed eagle, Gandhi is an avatar of Lord Vishnu and is usually used in a unique way on Kanchipuram saris, oversized and in the corners. And then, of course, there's Rudraksham, representing Rudraksha beads, which is a kind of necklace. Men wear made from the pits or stones of a fruit that we don't have in the West. In English, the name of the fruit is fruit of ambrosia, or sometimes it's called a blueberry tree. The number of Rudraksha beads on a garland necklace has to do with the prayers it's intended to be used for, much like a rosary. But there are many other common motifs as well: birds, leaves, obviously paisley mangoes, etc. Only in the past 30 years have they started using images of gods and goddesses. So while that may look more real, it's not really old fashioned. Also, only in very recent years have the saris themselves come pre embellished. So with embroidery and beading and stoning already done to the sari. Most of the time, women will have their saris and blouses hand embroidered and hand beaded by an artisan in a manner of their own design. There are a few of these hand embroiderers in Kanchipuram and obviously all throughout India. So if you're trying to buy the most thoroughly kanchi silk, that's what you're looking for. Okay, so now that you've got the big picture on cultural significance and pricing, how do you make sure you get the best value? First, remember, you don't have to buy in Kanchipuram. My first saris were not bought. They were given to me by a friend with unmarried sons cleaning out her closet. I was so thankful I got to see her collection because it really helped give me a broader perspective of what's out there. Many cities in India are famous for their different silk traditions, not just Kanchipuram. So if Kanchi saris are not really your thing, that's fine. If you prefer embroidered pastels or batiks, for example, to gold and silver on jewel tones, you will have more luck buying your sari souvenir in northern India when you get there. The same friend also brought me on my first sari window shopping excursion to the place her family has always shopped, Nali Silks. And to be frank, I couldn't have done it without her. Nali and Pothys are both 100-year-old department stores with multiple outlets throughout India. So think Saks Fifth Avenue, Bloomingdale's. They sell saris from everywhere, made of everything for every budget, and it's frankly overwhelming. You have to know what you're looking at to know if the design is well executed and the price is fair. They sell trends and tradition. It's up to you to discern which is which. It's really not for beginners. Personally, I feel comfortable picking up things that spark my interest in those places as long as my total spend is something I feel I can easily afford. But I don't think it's sufficient to try to buy heirloom quality handmade textiles there. They simply don't have the widest selection or the best prices due to the nature of their business. After shopping the sari meccas, I knew for sure I wanted to head to the silk cities, meet the makers, understand and buy the real deal directly if I could. Which brings me to the most important piece of advice I can give you in this video. Only shop at government stores. What do I mean by government store? As I mentioned before, the way the industry has always worked is that home weavers throughout Kanchipuram and in small nearby villages weave on hand looms in their traditional methods, and in the past made to order for true elites, and in more modern times also sell to boutiques. You can still get a sari made to order with photorealistic pure gold zari of anything you want on it, including your dog's face, as long as you have the money and can wait a couple months. However, the first co-op societies were formed by weavers who were not making a living wage selling to the merchants, like Nali, Poti, Pachaiyappas, Prakash. The first co-op society of weavers was formed in 1949, the original Kamachiaman Society, with 79 weavers. An iconic Indian film was actually made about it. It's titled Kanchipuram. It's actually free on YouTube with English subtitles. I will link to it in the description box below. It's very moving, historically accurate, highly recommend. Nowadays, not only does membership in the co-op societies continue to rise, but new co-op societies continue to be formed because many weavers were unable to really make a living in an unregulated market, especially with traditional skill sets like hand weaving silk, not building online click funnels to compete with fakes, synthetics, and Chinese imports. And the government has thankfully aided the setup of co-op societies in the villages and regulated them. So weavers from any given neighborhood join the co-op and share a storefront in town together. Today, there are 24 co-op societies managed by the Tamil Nadu government, working with 50,000 weavers on 60,000 looms, which is amazing. Most of them don't have their own storefront. Only, I think, 5 or 6 have their own storefront. Many share storefronts. The rest sell through co-optex, which is a nationwide government-owned chain, or wholesale to retailers. Kamachiaman, by the way, is still around, now has 2,000 weavers, the fanciest government storefront in town, and incredible English-speaking salespeople. In every government store, the saris are fixed price, no haggling. The government sets the prices and the markdown schedule. I believe based on how many months they've been on the shelf, and they also do sales for certain holidays. At the non-government shops, some of them, like Nally's, are mostly fixed price, but many of them will discount for volume. For example, if you spend over 50,000, they'll give you a 5% or 10% discount. Over 100,000, the discount will be more, but it's something you have to ask for, and it looks like sometimes fight for. At the government shops, they just don't do this, and I find that a relief. Government shops might seem overpriced because their saris are more expensive than what you find in the department stores, and the shops are far, far less glamorous. But that's because the value is greater for the money you pay. The quality is literally guaranteed by the government through strict accrediting and inspection processes. So they don't have to create a sparkly, vibey buying experience. So, of what government quality guarantees do I speak? The number one thing that no one talks about is the government goes around to regulate production. So it's something of a safeguard against child labor. As recently as 20 years ago, very poor families would basically sell their children for as low as 20 or 50 US dollars to master weavers. Of course, it wasn't considered a sale. It's technically bonded labor where the parents receive a loan and the child works it off. But by the child's employer's magical math, they never work it off. Hundreds of children work 12 to 16-hour days, 365 days a year, being mistreated in poor conditions. If they're lucky, they're permitted to go to a night school, which run from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. every day, but most of them don't have the energy or incentive to do so. The master weavers typically have 3 to 10 looms, so sometimes 10 to 30 child slaves each, and they usually sell to the department stores, who disavow any responsibility for how the master weavers do business with their subcontractors. At the co-op societies, every hand loom is registered and every weaver is registered to a hand loom, and they are inspected by government officials. So while of course the possibility always remains of child labor, and while the government in Kanchipuram can only handle local weavers, they can't control if children are spinning the silk or the zari in other provinces. These regulations do help lower the amount of child labor in the co-op production system. Regarding product quality guarantees, there are a few tagging schemes run by government ministries. So let's take a look at some of the labels they use that can help you figure out what you're buying. First, there's the geographical indication label, which has been around since 2005. It certifies not only Kanchipuram geographical origin, but also adherence to some production standards, one of them being the mix of silver and gold in a zari. Between 2005 and 2011, the zari on a Kanchipuram sari had to be 57% silver and 0.6% gold minimum to get the Kanchipuram geographical indication. As As gold became more and more expensive, they did lower the standards. Since 2011, 40% silver and 0.5% gold has been allowed. If you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, 42 plus 0.52 doesn't equal 100, what's the rest? It's copper. At some government shops, you'll just get the geographical indication label, which, by the way, is GI 15. Others go truly above and beyond with their content card. For example, according to the content card on one of my Anna silk saris, it is 40% silver, 0.5% gold, 35.5% copper, 24% silk with a tolerance of 2%. Co-optex is another store that, in addition to the GI label, will give a Zari authenticity card. Next, there's the Silk Mark India label issued by the Central Silk Board of the Ministry of Textiles, which indicates the sari is 100% silk, not mixed with anything. Here are a couple of these butterfly hologram stickers. These are both legitimate labels. Then there's the handloom tag. You'll actually find two of these because they're changing over from the symbol that looks like blue X's to the symbol that looks like an orange and green circle, but they mean the same thing, that it was hand woven, not machine made at all. There is overlap with these certifications. If a sari has the Kanchipuram GI 15 label, you don't really need the silk guarantee or the handloom guarantee because that's all included in the Kanchipuram GI standard. But it seems like the co-ops slap on every label they've got as a point of pride, as they should. Furthermore, the co-ops simply don't sell anything that's machine made or synthetic blend or anything like that. So you don't have to worry too much about these labels when you're shopping at the government stores, the weaver co-op societies. They'll be much more useful to you if you're shopping outside of the co-ops. So let's look at some examples from government stores with prices and guarantee labels to give you an idea of what you're getting into. I'll go from cheapest to most expensive. By the way, these aren't representative at all. These are just things that I liked and asked to see. This one's a pure silk stripe with a checked border and just the tiniest stripe of fine zari, 10,460 or $125. I really loves the kind of ombre finish on this one, 11,500. That's around $140. This very old school gingham with solid temple border, pure silk, 11,710 rupees, so $140. And this silk madras with GI indication, all the labels, 13,200 or $160. Another slightly better madras for 15,900 or $190. That just tends to be the price range for these. All of these checks were between 11,200 and 16,200. So between $135 and $195. I particularly liked this classic blue and white gingham with gold for 16,200 rupees or 195 US dollars. This cheerful watermelon was 18,400 or $220. This fantastic stripe with the silk mark guarantee and the weaver's tag, 19,960 rupees or $240. This one is what they chose for me before they knew about my bad taste at Kamakshiyama. Stunning, right? You can see the silk mark, the handloom mark, the GI label, and this was actually a great deal. It was marked down to 31,600. That's 380 bucks. This one is from Anna Silk. I wish I had a better picture. It was around 35,000 rupees, so $420. This absolute beauty. I tortured myself over this one. 39,780 or $480. You can see the silk mark, the handloom mark. This beautiful purple, which is pushing up into the range of wedding saris. I'm not sure if you can tell on the screen, I think so, but this is clearly fine zari, 42,360. That's $510. These are legit 50,000 rupee wedding zaris, so $600-ish. Aren't they all gorgeous? Now, for comparison's sake, let me show you some labels of non-government stores. Since they're all less expensive than the government store items, this time we'll go from most expensive to least expensive. This label is from Fab India, a popular chain throughout the big cities in India that claims to be hand-woven, sustainable, all that stuff, but they don't have any of the tags to prove it. And they're owned by LVMH, so buying from them is supporting corporate neocolonialism. This was also really pretty, supposedly hand-woven silk for, if I remember correctly, $97.50 or just over $115. And this one was really beautiful in person for $9,000 or $110. This was 100% linen for 7,000, so 85 bucks. This one is supposed to be hand block printed silk for 5,000 or $60. They're obviously not Kanchipuram. They might not even be hand loomed, but you can see they're not bad quality. This is what you can get in the nicer chain stores. I would describe Fab India as kind of like the Anthropology of India. And these are a couple labels from saris I bought at Nali. One is labeled cotton cotton, so supposedly 100% cotton body and border, but who knows? With obviously just gold colored thread, not any kind of real metal. The very weirdly specific price of 3,427 rupees is $41.10. And the other doesn't even have a content label. It's clearly partially or possibly completely synthetic, but it's on trend Barbie core for 1,984 rupees or $23.79. So who's complaining? You can see there's a total lack of basic information here. Forget guarantees. Here's a semi-silk, told me it was cotton, but I don't really know, from Ramraj for 1,240 rupees or $15. This one is cotton. It is marked pure cotton south. I can tell it was hand loomed because of holes on the selvage where the fabric was attached to the loom, but there's no tag indicating that anywhere. 750 rupees is $8.99. This is your workaday sweating through it, doing nasty yard work. Sorry. Obviously, the quality level is reflected in the price. If this pistachio and pink sari were pure silk, fine zari, hand loomed, GI standard, it would be 10 times the price or more. I hope all of these examples have given you food for thought. So, how will you know which stores are government stores? I'll just show you on the map. In the description box below, I have linked this shared Google Maps list for you to use. Apart from co-optex, there are only 5 places, so it won't be hard for you to hit them all. You'll notice they're all on the main drag. Do yourself a favor and don't stray from this list because lots of private shops copy the names of the co-op societies. First, let's talk about co-optex, the big mama of government stores. I believe this is a nationwide chain, though it might just be a state of Tamil Nadu chain. There's at least one co-optex shop in every city, and there are multiple co-optex shops in really, really big cities. Everything there is handmade, and they carry everything from $20 cotton saris to $1,500 and $2,000 pure silk, fine zari, Kanchipuram wedding saris. You can buy a Kanchipuram sari at any co-optex. There is a co-optex in Kanchipuram. Many individual weavers and master weavers and co-op societies that don't have their own storefront sell through co-optex. So you might very well end up with a Kanchipuram sari through them. Although honestly, I find the co-optex shops in Chennai are much better stocked than the co-optex shop actually in Kanchipuram. One advantage co-optex really has over the other government shops in Kanchipuram, however, is all the quality standards for cotton and linen saris. Also, you can obviously check out geographical indication stuff from elsewhere in India. So here are 2 examples. This is a 100% linen sari, hand looms for 3,850 rupees or $46. And this is a 100% silk, hand loomed ikat sari from Chinnalapati, priced at 11,810 rupees rupees or $142. One thing I really like about co-optex is how they feature little biographies of the weavers, so you know exactly where your sari came from. So working our way down, Venkateswara Weavers is right near Ekambaranathar Temple. So you can go to the temple early in the morning and then go to this shop first. The co-op stores open kind of early, 9:30. I don't have any particular opinions on this shop. I believe they sell cotton saris as well here. And then down on Gandhi Road, the main drag, there's Murugan, which I think had the best prices. There's Kanchipuram, which is my favorite. It's the fanciest. They have an incredible English speaking staff, a beautiful selection, and the prices are fair. The prices in all the government co-op shops are really, really similar. This store is by far my favorite place to shop in all of Kanchipuram. It should also be noted that Kanchipuram actually has two different shops on the street. They have the big new fancy one, and they have the little old, not so fancy one that looks like all the other government co-op societies with the derelict interior and blue and white sign. Then there's Arignar Anna. I did buy here. I felt they had a heavier selection of expensive stuff here. Not expensive as in overpriced, expensive as in the iconic good old styles. Tiruvallur, I have no particular thoughts on. I didn't happen to buy there, but really you should check all of them out because they don't have style differences. These are individual weavers doing their own thing, just selling through a co-op. So they're all going to have similar merchandise in that it's traditional, but different merchandise in that it's all one of a kind and handmade. Those are the big five. I do want to point out that while the government certified co-op societies are absolutely the safest places to buy, there are individual weavers, master weavers, and companies employing them who also have handloom certification from the government. Only two, however, either actually qualify for or have bothered to apply for and uphold the standards of the Kanchipuram GI label. The first is Kumaran Babu, the second Pachaiyappas. Pachaiyappas is a huge shop that has been in business for 100 years, maybe more. Kumaran Babu, I'm not sure, but they've also been around forever just because they are certified to use some of the labels doesn't mean all of their merchandise meets those standards. Finding the guaranteed stuff requires extra patience, extra questions, extra care, and accepting that you're dealing with a middleman and therefore will pay a higher price for the same quality product as you would at a co-op society. There are also a couple locally famous shops where they use the silk mark and the handloom labels, but not the GI labels. So you're going to have them test the metal content of your zari if that's important to you or you're paying a high price. Kanchipuram minimum level zari is manufactured in a government factory. It's all the same thread. So it's going to be to the same standards we discussed earlier. There's also some kind of zari testing machine in town. I think it's called the XCR machine. It's featured on the Arignar Anna tags. So you can have your zari metal tested. Don't accept any half-assed explanations about this. The first is Sri Balaji silk. There's actually a fantastic Tamil with the English subtitle YouTube video you must watch about understanding Kanchipuram silk saris, all explained by Sri Balaji. That's also linked in my description box below. Again, be careful to go to the locations I've saved on the map. If you just type Sri Balaji silk into Google, 15 stores will pop up copying his name. Finally, there's Dr. MGR. This is not on my list because I had a sketchy experience there. They have a bunch of street touts to get people in the door, which I really don't appreciate. They showed me nice stuff, but they seemed to be quoting me really high prices for it with absolutely none of the labels. I think this is sort of a special political situation, and I certainly don't mean to offend anyone. It's just unclear whether or not this place is a true cooperative. MGR was debatably Tamil Nadu's most famous actor ever. He became a star in the 1930s and 40s. After After independence and partition, he became a politician and rose through the highest ranks of politics. When he died, he left most of his wealth to charity, founding a medical university, an engineering college, etc. He owned several businesses and changed their structures to nonprofits before he died so that they would continue functioning as businesses, but all of their proceeds would go to charity. Where MGR Silks figures in all of this 40 years hence is very unclear. I think it's a little odd that they use the term Weavers Society on their signage instead of Cooperative Society like all of the others. I think it's a little odd that a lot of the merchandise photos they've put on Google Maps are actually just the best Kanchipuram saris from co-optex with the tags still visibly attached. I hope my suspicions are totally unfounded and this place is totally legit and wonderful. I did not put them on this map of reputable Kanchipuram silk merchants because personally, I don't want to buy anything that doesn't qualify for the geographical indication because that includes the quality standard for the fabric, the metal thread work, the weaving techniques. Some of these places also sell merchandise that only has the handloom label or only has the silk mark label. And also, obviously, you're a foreigner, they're going to try to get you to overpay. I prefer supporting weaver co-ops that formed so they didn't have to deal with usurious merchants. Buyer beware. So now that you know where to go, what can you expect from the buying experience? Due to the cultural and language barriers, some salespeople will be uncomfortable serving you. Don't be offended, it's to be expected. I did find at least one salesperson in each shop had a sufficient command of English that I didn't find myself using the Tamil to English Google Translate app much, but don't be afraid to do so if you have specific questions. No one I met was offended by it. I was never refused service, which has actually happened to me in Chennai. Also, as long as you use the terms you've learned in this video, pure 100% silk, fine, half fine, and tested zari, they will know what you're asking. You're going to have to jostle with serious wedding and event shoppers, and Indian couples and families tend to buy at least a few saris at a time, so they are all around much more appealing customers to serve. It helps if you are willing to wait a little bit, if you're polite, if you say hello, please, and thank you, obviously. I also found it works if you can give them some direction. Although I encountered salespeople who don't know the English words for colors or patterns, they did want to help me, and they started out by pulling out whole piles of saris that I gestured or pointed towards. Once they realized I was looking at all pinks and purples or all checks, they caught on quickly and pulled out all the examples that they thought I might like. Then I just quickly sorted into no and maybe piles, asked the prices. If the price was agreeable to me, I asked them to unfold the sari. Like any salespeople anywhere in the world, they value speed and decisiveness in a customer, not sycophantic chit chat, especially in a second or third language they're not confident in. Another thing I found they did was pull out saris in the same color as whatever I happened to be wearing. So if you're looking for pastel saris, for example, maybe wear a pastel dress that day. You can't really try on the saris in the government shops like you can in the big department stores, but they will unfold them so you can see the different parts. The parts of the sari are the body, the border, the palu or the shawl section, and the blouse. Indian women know looking at a half unfolded sari which piece is what. For you, it might be a little confusing at first, and you might get a little surprised when you get home and start draping. So make sure you like both halves of the sari just in case. They do have at least small mirrors and will fold the sari and drape it over your shoulder so you can check if the colors complement your complexion. Related to this, I didn't witness any real understanding of color theory among the salespeople. Although Tamils come in a wide range of shades, it seems most people buy the sari for its intrinsic beauty as an object. They don't seem to have the concepts of undertones, seasonality, not letting the clothes wear you, that boutique workers and fashion people are comfortable addressing where I'm from anyway. And speaking of New York, they almost always ask where you're from as an icebreaker. And upon hearing New York, one salesperson asked me if I wanted to see all of their black saris, which made me laugh. Sari is the new black. Some of the salespeople who speak better English will ask you your budget as their first question, and I think this is really smart. For me personally, I wasn't really comfortable spending more than 20,000 rupees on any single sari my first day out. But I wanted to see the difference between a 40,000 rupee sari and a 20,000 rupee sari, and also see what I could get for between 5 and 10, between 10 and 20. The pricing varies somewhat depending on the store because the weavers and their manager, I believe, set them. And of course, each village and person will have slightly different ideas about the value of their work. But also, you must recognize that they are accounting for factors you don't understand. So you might unwittingly be comparing apples and oranges. For example, the first time I saw the zigzag joining technique, it looked unfinished or even sloppy to me. I only found out later when watching this Tamil YouTube video, which I highly recommend, that it is actually part of their traditional weaving technique and merits a higher price, not a lower one. Conversely, they are unaware of how somebody outside their culture might impute value. For example, I personally was very interested in buying a madras check sari in Madras, while they were eager to show me their iconic jewel tones and gold work, which I worry a little about feeling too flashy in at home. A final note about the buying experience in government shops. They take great care in packing the sari in a branded box and bag and always give you a little framed picture of an idol. And when the sari is paid for and in the box, the salesperson actually turns towards the idol and bows, tapping his forehead against the sari box, I suppose saying a silent prayer for your sari to bring you luck. For them, it's probably as mundane as an Anglo saying bless you when someone sneezes. But for me, it felt very different from typical shopping, a very quote unquote authentic cultural experience, as obnoxious travel vloggers would say. There are two practicalities you should ready yourself for regarding payment methods and transport. First, government stores do not take international cards, so you'll have to pay in cash. ATMs in India only let foreigners take out a maximum of 10,000 rupees per withdrawal, so you'll have to accept paying an annoying amount in ATM fees and walking around with quite a bit of cash, which does require some vigilance. Not all Indian ATMs accept foreign cards. I found that the Axis Bank ATM on Gandhi Road worked fine. Also, the government shops don't have websites, and co-optex doesn't accept foreign cards either because Indian law still requires EMV 3D secure verification for all online purchases. While that's already considered an outdated security technology elsewhere in the world and is not even available as a feature on many Western credit and debit cards. So, any kanchi saris you buy, you'll have to buy in person before you leave India. You won't be able to pay over the phone or buy online and have saris mailed to you. Second, don't go it on foot. Yes, the distances between the shops are very short, but Kanchipuram is filthy and unwalkable. There's no nice way to say it. If you've ever been to the poorer parts of Asia, you know what I'm talking about. The sidewalks are intermittent and appalling, from food waste to animal excrement, not to mention people spitting and pissing all over, and the unfiltered vehicle exhaust fumes. It's much better to hire a driver for the day to chauffeur you around. The Ola app offers hourly rentals, so you can book 7 hours for around 2,000 rupees or 25 bucks and hit temples between 8 a.m. and noon, shop and eat from noon to 4, then more temples from 4 to sunset. The very last point I want to make in this video is that just because you've purchased your sari doesn't mean you're done. You'll have to have your blouse tailored and have what they call a footer or hand-sewn lining put in along the portion of the sari that you might step on and rip accidentally. I did not have time to find a ladies' tailor in Kanchipuram, though I'm sure there are many, and I'm sure the bigger stores like Pachaiyappas have them in-house. If you want your sari or blouse embroidered or embellished, that is a time-consuming job that you might not want to hang around Kanchi to get done. But if you want it done authentically, you'll need to do it somewhere in Tamil Nadu at least, so account for that. Maybe you want to do your sari buying earlier in your vacation rather than later. Finally, don't forget you need something elastic or drawstring to tuck the sari into. These days, a lot of women just use bike shorts or leggings but you can get a traditional drawstring ankle length A-line cotton petticoat in a rainbow of shades at Nolly for less than $10. They don't sell them everywhere, so just go to Nolly if you want a really full look to your skirt. It is sort of bittersweet that some of the most beautiful, expensive, iconic, historic Indian textiles are manufactured in a filthy, ugly, otherwise boring, kind of remote town. But if you don't make your way out to these places in the world and back, what does it even mean to buy a souvenir, right? I hope this guide helped you. Let me know in the comments below if you have gone shopping in Kanchi, what your experience was like. And I'll see you next time. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.